Hi, I'm Dr. Paul with Chiropractic Secrets of Chiropractic Success. And again, I teach chiropractors how to start their practice, grow their practice, how to hire, train associate doctors, and how to create wealth through investing in real estate. I've opened 77 offices in 20 states. I only practiced full-time 7 years, part-time 2 years, and that was it. I was able to retire, travel the world, and I basically trained, help chiropractors open their practice. Well, one of the questions that we always talk about is where to start a practice. Now, in a separate video, I already talked about the big picture, going back to where there's familiarity and security. But after you narrow it down to that area, then what you do is you have to be aware of something, and this is a common mistake that's made, is the chiropractors will always go and want to start a practice to what they value. And now remember, we're talking about typically a middle class, middle upper collar, educated person. That's not the chiropractic market. So unfortunately, chiropractors will typically go, when they do pick an area, they'll go to the wrong part of town. They'll go to the mid or upper class white collar town. The reason to do is because they like it. There's everything new and shiny and all that. And then they say, well, these people have the money, they can afford to care. And that's not how it works. It doesn't matter if they have money. What matters is if they have a perceived need and how strong that need is. And this is why the blue collar community is the largest segment that goes to chiropractors. Why? Because they need their joints, especially their back, to work. In other words, for survival. And that's why the blue collar community, that first of all, they have more injuries because they use their body and they need their body. So how high is somebody's need if they're having back or neck pain, and how much are they willing to spend if they need their neck or back to go to work, like an electrician or a plumber, versus somebody like an attorney or somebody like that who doesn't need their neck or back. They can just take time off or take some medication, and that's it. They're not even going to be like our accountant. They're not even going to be stressing their back. So they don't even have as many problems in the first place. So it's not about the amount of money, because there's 6 socioeconomic classes. Out of the 6, 5 of them can afford chiropractic care. Now, the one can't. The only people that cannot afford chiropractic care are the people under the bridge or the homeless. And they can still barter. So out of the 6, 5 can. Now, out of those 5, there's only 2 that have the money to pay up front for chiropractic care. If they were going to pay a few hundred or $1,000 or $2,000, there's only 2 socioeconomic classes that can do that. That's the middle, upper collar, white collar, and that's not the target market. So the target market is the 3 out of 5. That's the people that go to chiropractors because they need their neck, they need their back to perform important functions of activities of daily living, even their job to create, food, shelter, etc. So having said that, the best place to go is what you do is you after you've picked the general area where you have an emotional connection. You're from the area, your mom and dad are there, you're depending on how close you are to who you are, your wife's from there, that kind of thing. So that puts you in a general area. Then you go, okay, well, what part of that area do you go? Now you go to the second part of the decision making, and that's when you go into the demographics, psychographics, and geographics. What does that mean? That's when you go into the people who are most likely to buy chiropractic, and that's not middle upper class white collar. It's blue collar. That's who picks chiropractic for the reasons I just explained. Now, 3 out of 5 of those categories cannot afford to pay up front, but they can afford terms. That's also the reason you need to know how to offer your services for terms. Because if only 2 out of the 6 categories will be able to cut a check for the full amount, and the majority of those 2 categories don't even go to chiropractors. So the peak curve of the people who go to chiropractors are the blue collar people, and they don't have $1,000 or $2,000 or $3,000 sitting in the bank, but they can afford terms. So they'll have the highest need, way more than the white collar. They'll be more willing to get chiropractic more care. They'll be more wanting to get chiropractic care, and they'll need it so they can use their body to get back to work, to pay for their shelter, their food, and their security. That's what's important. So as an example, without going into great detail, because we actually do this in great detail, we'll find out the demographics of these different zip codes. We'll find out the demographics, the psychographics, and the geographics and the psychographic barriers. And then we'll know which one has the highest probability, has the highest percentage of people that have the highest likelihood of going to a chiropractor, kind of what you call the C curve, the peak of the C curve of a bell curve. That's what we're looking for. So we'll do that for several locations, and then from the general area where we're from. And then what we'll do is, okay, now remember, that does not mean you live there. You're going to want to live where your demographics and psychographics are, which is middle, upper class, white collar. You're not going to want to practice there. So you're going to want to practice where the majority of people pick chiropractic. So that's how we find it. I mean, how do you think McDonald's finds places, or Papa John's, or, this is how all the franchises know where to put their businesses. It's called reverse engineering. You find out, who buys your product or service demographically, psychographically, geographically, and then you go and put your store there, or where there's the majority of those that fit that category. That just makes common sense. But most chiropractors don't know any of this. They've never heard of demographic, psychographics, geographic, psychographic barriers. They've never heard of any of this. So they typically make the absolute wrong decisions regularly. So so the first decision is where you're emotionally connected to generic area. Then after that, you want to go, okay, well, where's the highest probability of middle, lower class, blue collar people that have the highest likelihood of utilizing chiropractic? Now, I'm cutting to the chase, but there's actually real data. There's actually real numbers. That's like demographics includes income, familiar status, occupation, gender. See, so there's very specific, you can get unbelievably specific for who picks chiropractic, and then go, well, how many of those people are in that area? Well, doesn't it just make sense to go to an area where there's more of those people as opposed to less of those people? See, that's how I opened 77 offices in 20 states, not just by throwing a dart. This is how franchises do it. This is how you reverse engineer and you make wise decisions. Now, again, it doesn't mean you live there. You go live wherever it is you want to live, but it's not. It's almost never going to be where you should practice and live. Is typically never the same area, because they're two totally different demographics and psychographics. Where you want to live versus a middle collar, lower class, blue collar person would live. They're two different areas. Okay, so then we do the study for the 2, 3, and I typically do up to 5 areas. I'll go, okay, let's do the study of demographic, psychographics, geographic, psychographic barriers for these 5 areas of this region. And then I'll go, well, this has the most, this has the second most percentage-wise, versus this, versus this, versus this. Now, I won't pay too much attention to ratios of chiropractors because we know marketing. So we can go in the middle of anywhere and get a lot of business because we know the S-curve of economics and marketing, when most chiropractors don't. So that's not going to be a fact. What matters to us is, are we in the highest probability of demographics, psychographics, geographics, and are we paying attention to psychographic barriers? That's what matters most. That's what's going to give you the highest probability of market naturally. Okay. In other words, it's going to be easier, that much easier. Okay. So that's how we'll find the town. So we're kind of tearing this down. So the first is the general area based on the emotional connection, either with individuals or imprinting or geography or from that area. And so that's a big area. Then we'll narrow it down and go, okay, let's do demographics, psychographic, geographics. and pick out 4 or 5 different areas and go, okay, which one has the highest probability of having the highest number of potential chiropractic patients? And so that takes us to that town. Okay. And then in a separate video, I'll take it to the next step.